My name is Bruno Moreland and I teach AP African American Studies. And in this series, I'll go over all the required sources in the AP African American Studies curriculum. Today, we're looking at the required sources from Unit 1.3. It's a map of the Bantu migration. As you can see on the map, there were two clusters of migrations, one that went directly south and the other one went first eastward and then southward. For a little more context, at 3000 BCE in northern Africa, the Egyptian civilization was starting with the first kingdoms. So this is at the same time that the Bantu started to make their way southward. From what you can see on the map, the migration isn't completely linear. It starts to go in one direction and it veers off again. And it also happens in waves. It doesn't all happen at once. And it takes about 2,500 to 3,000 years for the migration to be fully complete. Now, there's three different possible reasons for why the migration started. One was that the rulers in that area wanted to expand. Another factor for the migration could have been environmental. The drying grasslands would have forced people to move off that land if they were seeking new lands for agriculture. And the last one would be population pressures. So if the population in that area of sub-Saharan Africa started to get too big for the land to sustain, then people would look for new places to go and farm. Now, the Bantu, before they went out into this migration, they had two key pieces of knowledge. The first one was ironworking or iron smelting, and then the other one was agriculture. So as they start to go onto this migration, they're bringing this new knowledge of tools and methods for making food that were not previously seen in those areas. So for this reason, historians say that the Bantu were a dominant minority. That means that they were a newer group into the areas that they migrated into. And because of their knowledge of ironworking and agriculture, they were very influential to the new people that they met, which is why the people that currently live in those areas that the Bantu migration went through still hold on to a lot of the cultural and even the genetic makeup of the Bantu people that went through there. So that gets us to the effects of the Bantu migration across this entire region. And some of this we've already talked about. So they went through and they spread the knowledge of ironworking and agriculture through these new regions. They also spread their language. All the places that they went into had their own unique and diverse language. And after the Bantu migration, they intermixed, and now all these languages have some Bantu-derived vocabulary or Bantu-derived grammar. Although they are still very different from each other, there are some languages within these regions that could be mutually intelligible. That means that one speaker would be able to understand the language of another just because of the similarities in vocabulary or grammar. But it's really important to say that not all Bantu languages are mutually intelligible, but those that are closest together in geography would be more easily to understand by the different speakers. So the languages that are spoken in these different parts of sub-Saharan Africa is actually one of the ways in which the migration has been tracked by anthropologists and even linguistic anthropologists. Today, there are over 500 Bantu-derived languages in sub-Saharan Africa. It makes up a third of all total languages spoken in the African continent, and it also makes up 2/3 of all the languages spoken in sub-Saharan Africa. So they had a huge impact after this migration. One of the largest Bantu-derived languages is Swahili, that is spoken in most Eastern Africa. It's become the lingua franca, or the language that most people in the region are able to speak to communicate with each other across long distances. They make up about 88 million speakers in the continent. Another one of these languages is Kikongo, which is spoken in the Western Sub-Saharan Africa with about 7 million speakers. Now, it's important to point out that not all of the people that encountered the Bantu on their migration either intermarried or mixed in with the Bantu and their cultural practices. For example, the Pygmy, the Hadza, and the Khoisan people all still show elements of a unique culture that is very different than that of the Bantu. And this gets us into the conversation about whether this Bantu expansion was just purely a migration of people or also an expansion of culture and language. Because the migration took over 1,000 years, the first Bantu migrants from eastern Nigeria and western Cameroon weren't the ones that made it all the way down to southern Africa. Instead, it happened over several hundreds generations, and throughout that time, their language practices and their tools were being spread amongst the people which they came into contact. A lot of the times, the tools and the language was spread to new regions before the physical migration of Bantu people. And so that leads us into some misconceptions about the Bantu migration that we want to clear up before we move forward. The first one, I just mentioned that the Bantu migration did not happen all at once. It took several hundred generations of people moving from one place to another. And sometimes, like we said, the cultural practices moved ahead of the people because they were being adopted by those people that were neighboring the Bantu migrants. Again, it was not one directional. As you can see from the map, there are two splinter groups. One goes directly south, the other one goes eastward and then southward. And then even that splinter group that went east first ends up making its way across the African interior towards the western coast of Africa at various different points. There is little evidence that there was war or conflict, that Bantu migration was caused by war or conflict. Most of the migration and the adoption of these cultural practices like language seem to have been fairly peaceful. And finally, the last misconception is about languages. We just mentioned it before. Not all Bantu languages are mutually intelligible. There are several different branches. Some of them may have a shared vocabulary or they may have a shared grammar, but not all Bantu languages are the same. And so that's it for this video. We've gone over the one required source in Unit 1.3. It was this map of the Bantu expansion. I hope you come back for the next topic, in which we'll be looking at the Axumite coin and a Knox sculpture. Thank you.